All right, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you back to our special election coverage. I'm Steve Malzberg, usually seen at noon and 7 p.m. Tonight, everything's different. I will be here co-hosting with my colleague J.D. Hayworth at 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 and 11, so keep it here all night long. Joining us right now to talk about what they believe we could expect, and oh so much more, is Kristin Tate, libertarian author and political columnist, founder of the libertarianchick.com, and author of Government Gone Wild, and Jim Hoft, founder of the gatewaypundit.com, conservative blogger and investigative reporter. All right, Kristin, in contact always with millennials and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you're in New York. It's a foregone conclusion, obviously, where New York is going, but you know, you have your finger on the pulse. You have a massive social media following, et cetera. There were reports that while Hispanics are turning out in record numbers, a lot of millennials are staying home. Tell me what you think of those reports.
Yeah, that's right. Millennials arguably put Barack Obama over the edge in 2008. They turned out in record numbers. And while millennials definitely prefer Hillary to Trump in this race, they're not as enthusiastic about her. Even just going on my Facebook, you know, here's an anecdote. Going on my Facebook, I barely see any posts about voting for Hillary, whereas in 2008 and 2012, I saw, you know, I was inundated with pro-Obama stuff. So Hillary can't rely on high turnout from millennials or the black vote. I don't think they're going to turn out for her either. What I'm concerned about is the Latino vote, specifically in Florida. You know, in 2012, Obama won Florida by fewer than 100,000 votes. And that non-Cuban Hispanic population in Florida is growing every day. There's a huge exodus out of Puerto Rico right now, Steve, as they're dealing with this debt crisis there. And those folks are all moving to Florida. Once they get to Florida, they have full voting rights, and most of those folks will vote for Hillary. So that is what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, and Jim, you know, the media is touting it as described by Kristin, but then, you know, you look at the traditional 30 or so, for 35% or so of Hispanics that go for Republican candidates. And then there was a poll that came out just yesterday that showed, and it was geared to Hispanics, showed that 51% want tougher crackdowns on illegal immigrants. So I don't know, what can we make of this huge supposed increase in the Hispanic quote-unquote vote in a lot of the key swing states?
Well, we know that in Florida, Trump had some good news from the Cuban voters. They were coming back to his camp. And I also noticed the LA Times poll that a lot of people followed. They had a 30-some% were voting, Hispanics were voting for Trump. So this is good news for Trump. The fact that we have more Latino voters out there doesn't necessarily mean that they're all flocking to Hillary. And God, let's hope not. These Puerto Ricans aren't voting for Hillary after the destruction that they just went through in Puerto Rico. You'd think they'd switch their mind on that.
Yeah, well, yeah, again, you never know. You just never know. Kristin, so, you know, we're looking here at possibly a long night. We'll know, like I said, we have at 7 o'clock Florida and New Hampshire. Polls close 7:30. You have North Carolina. You got Arizona at 9 and a whole bunch of others, the Pennsylvania, of course, at 8, as well as Michigan. So, you know, again, if it's an early night, Kristin, then it's a quote-unquote early night, then it's going to be bad news for Donald Trump. If it's a long night and we're going down to the wire and looking at states and looking at roadmaps and possibilities, then that means Donald Trump is still alive and still in it.
That's absolutely right. It's an uphill battle for Trump, but it's not impossible for him to win this race. The states we've got to look at are Florida and North Carolina. I don't think he can win the White House without those states. And then he's also got to get a blue-leaning state to come out for him. So like Pennsylvania, Michigan's in play now, Colorado, he's got to get one of those states. So if the polls remain close in those states, this is going to be a long night and we could still see a Trump win. I don't believe any of these exit polls, by the way. Slate has a big exit poll right now that's showing Hillary is way up in these swing states. I don't believe any of those polls. I think they are showing Hillary is winning to dissuade Trump voters from making it to the polls. We've got to wait until we see the hard results.
Right, Jim, you can't trust the so-called media. We it's not even so-called mainstream media. It's so-called media because they're not anything other than a propaganda arm of the DNC, as we found out. But first talk about the Reuters likely turnout poll, which have some really fascinating numbers. I mean, talk about how drastic Hillary has dropped.
Yeah, this is amazing. So nobody noticed this in the last few days, but 4 days ago, Hillary was at like 45, maybe 44%. And for likely turnout, she was leading Trump, and it tanked. She just hit the bottom. She's dropped 8 points in like 4 days. We posted that up on Gateway Pundit today. Trump surged. It was dramatic looking at this poll. I'm glad I took a screen grab because after we posted on this, Reuters took the poll down. They deleted the days from November 3rd where Hillary started collapsing. So we also have that captured, but it's amazing. And it's an amazing poll. I mean, it should give hope to a lot of Trump supporters.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want you to address, and then we'll let Kristin weigh in on this one as well, voting irregularity. I mean, it's not enough to change an election or anything like that, I don't believe. However, when there are two machines in one polling place in Pennsylvania where when you vote Republican down the line, that there are accusations and apparent confirmation from the poll watcher there who looked at it that it flips on its own to all Democrat. I mean, that's a problem.
It's amazing, isn't it? Why don't we ever hear of these machines
flipping the other way,
flipping the vote to all Republican? It never happens.
It's crazy. Kristin, I mean, when you hear stories like this, and here in Pennsylvania, and then you got some other reports from other places. Utah has widespread machine irregularities or outages or whatever. When these things crop up, it just doesn't do a lot to enhance in the minds of the voters and the nation the sanctity of the elections.
Right, and I've got to disagree with you, Steve. This could be enough to swing the election in these really tight states just because we don't know how rampant this fraud is. I'm from New Hampshire, and I saw some posts on Facebook today of my friends who were voting, and they said in the parking lot of these polling places are cars with Vermont plates, Massachusetts plates. Apparently, no one was even asking for ID in these polling places. So in these tight states, this kind of voting fraud that we're seeing in Pennsylvania and these other places really could have an impact, and it's horrible.
Well, were there any license plates from heaven? Because there probably were a lot of dead people voting also. Jim, you also had another something I alluded to in my spotlight at the beginning of the hour. A picture from Nevada of these poll workers wearing, there it is, defeat Trump. And I see two clearly, and then there's the other, probably two more at least that have it. And I talked about how I went, and rightfully so, I told my son, don't come in with me. He followed me in. He's wearing a Trump hat in New Jersey, Trump hat and a Trump Pence shirt. And eventually they tossed him out, rightfully so. How do poll workers get to wear dump Trump T-shirts?
Yeah, I can't figure it out, Steve, and neither can you. I know that you're a good father, though, from that little story you just shared. Congratulations.
Well, you don't know the half of it. He just got his driver's license, and he's now driving my car alone. So you don't know the half of it. But that's neither here nor there. So let me ask you, Kristin, Senate. What do you think is going to happen in the Senate? Is it going to switch? Is it going to flip?
No, I don't think it will. And what really makes me encouraged, Steve, is that even if Hillary wins this election, I think there's an enormous opportunity for Republicans in 2018 to dominate in the House and Senate because, a lot of conservatives in this country are really livid right now. And if we have a few years of Hillary and open borders and high spending, they're going to be even more energized at the next election.
Yeah,
so I remain optimistic.
It's interesting, Jim. I heard David, the guy on CNN who served all the presidents, David
Felter?
Gergen, say
Gergen.
that if Republicans lose, it'll be the blank out of presidential elections, X amount of elections that they lost. So they're on the wrong side of history. And I'm like, hey, they had a landslide 2 years ago in the House and in the Senate. They have more governorships than anybody else. It's just the presidential election demographics are getting harder and harder, not the tone of the country.
Truly. And, I still have hope. I think a good sign in this election is that Trump didn't even go to Ohio the last 2 days. He went to other blue states, and so he thinks that Ohio's wrapped up. He didn't go to Iowa. He thinks Iowa's wrapped up. So there's some very good signs coming out of the Trump campaign.
Yep.
I'm keeping my hope up, Steve. I think it's going to be a Trump victory tonight.
All right. Again, that's what I like to hear. I like to pump up the troops. All right. If you haven't voted, folks, go vote now. Kristin Tate, Jim Hoft, thank you both very much. Coming up, we turn to the economy and what a Trump or Hillary presidency will mean for the workforce. Stephen Moore and Joe Pags are next. Keep it here.